It's just inconceivable. I don't know why those bears chased him down. Speaking of moist, I really feel like White Fang was not his best novel. I'm not into that bohemian thing. Welcome to New Hope Theater. I'm Darren Hansen. Welcome to New Hope Theater. We have a short but sweet masterpiece for you tonight. A film that gets little talk around this globe, but in my book, should earn all sorts of awards. It is called Jesus is Everything. Now, as you watch this film, please take note of the director's quiet, almost delicate use of mise en scène, but also listen for the soundtrack as the audio producer just uses music in such a way at just the right moments to bring passion to the piece. I think you're going to enjoy Jesus is Everything. So one day, Jesus and his disciples were walking along the road. His disciples did happen to look kind of like an armed guard, but anyway, as Jesus was walking down the road, they ran into a man who was trapped, fallen in some sort of accident. His little building that he was building exploded. And so Jesus was like, we got to help this guy. And so some of the disciples like, yeah, we've got to help this guy. What are we going to do? And one of the disciples just happened to have the jaws of life, which was really cool. And so he went running up to Jesus and he said, I've got the jaws of life. I can get him out. And Jesus said, now, wait a minute, son. Wait right there. Put that away. We don't do things that way. I am the jaws of life. The disciple kind of walked away dejected, not knowing what was going to happen. And just then, Jesus, through his power, lifted the giant boat-looking thing in the air and released this man from danger. Yay! And the disciples were like, yay! Let's take pictures. So one day, large groups of people were walking along with him. Jesus turned to them and told them these things. Anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of their father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, even your own self, cannot be my disciple. Anyone who won't shoulder his own cross and follow behind me can't be my disciple. Hey, Jesus, how's this for a cross? Well, that's not exactly... Well, that is pretty impressive, though. That's a really impressive cross, son. But no, that's not what I meant. I wasn't really meaning like an actual cross. Anyway, I need to move on. Is there anyone here who's planning to build their own house or a tower or something like that? I am, Jesus. I'm getting ready to build stuff. I mean, that's why I look like a construction guy and stuff. Okay, awesome. Well, think about this for a second. What's your name? My name's Joe. Okay, Joe. Let's say that Joe's gonna build this tower, everybody. Can everybody say that together? Joe's gonna build this tower. Joe's gonna build a tower. Okay, oops, sorry, Frank. So, Joe's gonna build this tower, and what is he gonna do? I mean, you can't just like build it without even planning, right, Joe? That's right, Jesus, you gotta have a plan. So, Joe, why don't you go plan to build that thing? Okay. So Joe, when he plans to build this new house, doesn't he just first sit down and figure out the cost so he knows if he can complete it? If you only get the foundation laid and you run out of money, you're gonna look pretty foolish. And everyone passing by will poke fun of you. But if you count the costs right, Joe could really build this cool tower. Like this. Hey Joe, that's awesome. Way to go, Joe. Cool tower. Thanks, guys. I counted the cost, you know. Or can you imagine a king going into battle against another king without first deciding whether it is possible with his 10,000 troops to face the 20,000 troops of the other? And if he decides he can't, won't he send an emissary and work out a truce? And the crowd kind of mumbles like, what's he talking about? Like this king and all these troops and army? I hope that's not true. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just a story. Listen to what he's saying. Yeah, so I'm like the king, right? Hey, man, you're supposed to help me in all sorts of, give me all sorts of advice, right? So like, we've got like 10,000 troops, but they've got like 20,000, and they look pretty menacing. Look at them over there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, there's a bunch of heads over there. That doesn't look good for us. If I'm you, I'm like sending somebody over there for like a truce, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I think you're right. I don't think we should be doing battle like that. We need to count the costs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and let's get out of here. Hey, where'd they go? Where'd they go? And they take off? Big chickens? Hey, does this mean we don't have anybody to fight? Yeah, I guess we don't have anybody to fight. Well, come on then. I mean, I'm bored. We gotta do something. How about, I think you're a chicken. I'm not a chicken. You're a chicken.
Hey guys, just chill it.
No! Ow! 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 Ow!
Simply put, if you're not willing to take what is dearest to you, whether plans or people, and kiss it goodbye, you can't be my disciple.
That was a good nap. What did he say about kissing?
Hey everybody, welcome to Built to Last Lesson 1. Hope you enjoyed our little New Hope theater there. We had a great time doing that. We're looking at Luke chapter 14, 25 through 33. And the gist of this whole lesson in talking about how great Jesus is also kind of a looking at his call to us, call upon our lives. And this particular passage in Luke is a great passage. And there are lots of parallel passages in the Gospels as well that really give us an insight into how radical some of his teaching was when it came to his call that he had upon us, God's call that he has upon our lives. And specifically, some of the words that he said to the disciples that were right next to him and the people who were coming to new belief in him, and how he kind of radically called them to a life of obedience, a life of following him, a life of giving up things that the world sees as so important. There's a huge cost in following Jesus, and he makes that very clear. So tonight we're going to have some really good discussion, hopefully over this particular passage, and just kind of taking a look of what kind of cost it really was to the disciples and the people that were following Jesus at the time. And also what kind of cost do we have to be counting and taking a look at in our own lives? At what cost is it to us to be Jesus followers? You know, Jesus said some tough things when he was teaching, and Luke 14 exemplifies that. And you're going to have a chance to read that and talk about that. But in these tough things, think about some of the people he ran into. I mean, some of his closest disciples were fishermen. There was a guy who was a tax collector. And some of the things he said to them were just drop your nets and follow me. You know, leave the tax stuff behind and follow me. I mean, some of these guys gave up a lot. He even makes comments here in Luke about your family. I mean, you need to give up your family for the sake of following Jesus? I mean, it just seems like some really tough teaching. I hope you have a great time kind of going through that passage and trying to get at the heart of what Jesus was saying and what he meant. I mean, in some versions we even have where it says that we're supposed to hate our family. Now, what is that? What do you mean by that? And so that's part of what this lesson is about. And also, he also said that we need to carry our own cross. What does it mean to carry your own cross? These are really good questions to ask as Jesus followers. Now, one thing I might say is there's a passage in the Gospel of John that I'm reminded of while I was preparing for this lesson, where Jesus had just fed the 5,000, and he kind of lays out a challenge to everybody that he's not going to feed them anymore, and that he's the bread of life, that you need to be, if you want to be a part of me, then you need to eat of my flesh, drink of my blood, you need to follow me. And a lot of people left him at that point because they weren't getting what they wanted from him. A lot of people counted the cost and turned around. And I love what Peter says to Jesus when Jesus asked him the question along with the other disciples, "Are you going to leave me too?" And Peter says to him, "Lord, where else would we go? You're the one that holds the words of eternal life. You're the only one." So I want to be thinking about that as we think about counting the cost of what it means to follow him. I believe it's worth it. It's worth it when you think of who Jesus is, when you think of how much he's forgiven us, when you think of what he has done for us, coming from heaven to earth, the sacrifice that he made, when you think of how he wants to free us, how he wants us to live a life that's worth living. You know, I guess sometimes when we talk about this subject, it is difficult, and we do need to count the cost. It is difficult to think of what it's really going to take from us to be a Jesus follower. But I want you to keep in mind while you're having this discussion, and maybe you need to talk about it some more too. Is it worth it? I think it is. I know it is.